Have you ever felt that deep, quiet fear that your life might never become what it could have been? Not because you're not smart enough or talented enough, but because something invisible keeps you stuck just a few steps away from your own potential. In this video, we are going to unpack the psychology of wasted potential, why it happens, how it traps you, and how you can finally escape it before it turns into a lifelong regret. When people say you have so much potential, it sounds like a compliment, but it often lands like a pressure. It implies there is a version of you that is bigger, better, more successful, and more impressive than who you are today. The psychological pain of wasted potential comes from comparing your current self to that imagined, ideal version. And the bigger that gap feels, the more shame, regret, and confusion tend to grow. Psychologists call this the gap between your actual self and your ideal self. Your actual self is who you are right now, your habits, your results, your daily life. Your ideal self is who you think you should be, the career you should have, the body you should have, the relationships, the skills, the money, all of it. The larger the distance between those two selves, the more likely you are to feel like you're wasting something important. But here's the twist. Potential is not a fixed, measurable thing. It's not like a gas tank that's either full or empty. Potential is a story, a mental model, about what could happen if certain conditions were met, if you behaved differently, if life went a certain way. We suffer over wasted potential not because there is some objective meter of how great we were supposed to be, but because we become emotionally attached to a story about who we should have become. From a psychological perspective, this is tied to self-discrepancy theory. We don't just have an ideal self, we also have an ought self, who we feel we ought to be to satisfy others' expectations, parents, teachers, culture, friends. When you feel like you're wasting your potential, you often trapped between these two, disappointed that you not living up to your own dreams, and ashamed that you're not meeting what others expected of you. This is why wasted potential hurts more than simple failure. If you tried your best, gave something everything you had, and failed, there's at least a kind of closure. But when you believe you could have done more and didn't, the mind tortures you with endless what-if scenarios. What if I'd started earlier? What if I hadn't quit? What if I'd been more disciplined? Those questions have no clear answers, so the suffering becomes chronic. On top of that, we live in a comparison culture. Social media constantly shows you people your age, or younger, who seem to be doing everything you ever wanted to do. They're fitter, richer, more accomplished, more traveled, more creative. You don't just carry your own ideal in your head, you're bombarded with other people's highlight reels, which you then use as proof that you're behind or wasting your talents. So, wasted potential is not just about laziness or lack of effort. It's a psychological state where your identity, your expectations, and your emotions collide. It's a mix of shame, I should be more than this, fear, maybe I'll never become who I want to be, and confusion, if I'm capable, why don't I act like it? That internal storm is what we are really talking about when we talk about wasted potential. The good news is, there are reasons this happens. You're not just broken or weak. There are predictable psychological patterns that keep people stuck in this painful gap between who they are and who they could be. And once you understand those patterns, you can start to change them. In the next segment, we'll go deeper into the internal barriers, fear, perfectionism, procrastination, and self-sabotage that quietly turn raw potential into regret over time. If you've ever found yourself thinking, I know what I should be doing, so why don't I just do it? You've already met the internal enemies of potential. These are not random flaws, they are psychological defense mechanisms that, at some point, tried to protect you. The problem is, they end up protecting you from the very risks you need to take to grow. Let's start with fear of failure. On the surface, fear of failure sounds simple. You don't want to fail because failure hurts. But underneath, it's usually deeper. Failure doesn't just mean, this project didn't work. It often feels like, this proves I'm not good enough. If your self-worth is tightly tied to being talented or smart, then trying and failing feels like a direct attack on your identity. So you avoid trying at all. Psychologists call one of the strategies you use here self-handicapping. You procrastinate, you start late, you forget, you don't really prepare. Why? Because if you fail, you get to say, well, I didn't really try. Your ego stays protected. The potential is preserved in your imagination. If I'd actually tried, I could have done it. This is one of the most common ways people turn potential into something permanently unused. Then there's perfectionism. Perfectionism seems like a high standard, but it's often an excuse not to start. If something can't be done perfectly, the perfectionist brain says it's not worth doing at all. So you wait for the perfect time, the perfect plan, the perfect skill level, and that perfect moment never arrives. Years go by, and your potential stays locked inside "I'll start when" sentences. Behind both fear of failure and perfectionism is usually a fixed mindset, the belief that your abilities are set, and every result is a verdict on who you are. If you believe that messing up means you're not talented, then of course you'll resist any situation where you could be exposed. But if you shift to a growth mindset, the belief that skills are developed, not revealed, suddenly failure becomes information instead of a judgment. Procrastination is another powerful tool your mind uses against your own potential. On the surface, it looks like laziness or lack of discipline, but very often, procrastination is emotion management. You're not avoiding the task, you're avoiding the uncomfortable feelings the task triggers: anxiety, confusion, self-doubt, fear of not being good enough. Scrolling, gaming, YouTube, these become quick ways to escape those feelings. Over time, this leads to learned helplessness. After enough cycles of "I said I'd do it, but I didn't," you start to internalize a story: "I must just be the kind of person who never follows through." That belief then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why plan big things if you're convinced you won't act on them? And just like that, potential slowly erodes into a quiet, resigned identity. Another subtle inner enemy is fear of success. This might sound strange. Who's afraid of getting what they want? But success brings visibility, expectations, and pressure. If you succeed, people will expect you to keep succeeding. If you grow, your relationships might change. If you improve, you might no longer fit into the roles you've always played. Sometimes, staying stuck feels safer than stepping into a bigger life. The core thing to understand is this: your brain is not wired for maximum potential. It's wired for safety and predictability. Anything that feels risky to your identity, your belonging, or your emotional comfort will trigger resistance. You will call that resistance laziness, lack of motivation, or wasting potential. But underneath, it's your nervous system saying, "Change is scary. Let's stay where we are." So if you feel like you're always getting in your own way, you're not uniquely broken, you're human. Your internal barriers are predictable, understandable, and changeable. But there is another piece we need to look at: your environment and the external forces that shaped you. In the next segment, we'll explore the external side of wasted potential, how family, culture, school, and circumstances can quietly shape what you believe is possible for you, often without you realizing it. It is tempting to think that potential is purely an individual thing. If you really wanted it, you'd make it happen. That sounds empowering, but it ignores a massive part of the picture: your environment. The psychology of wasted potential is not just inside your head. It's also in the systems and stories that raised you. Start with family. The messages you received growing up, spoken and unspoken, shape your beliefs about what is realistic for you. Maybe you heard, "Don't aim too high, you'll just be disappointed," or "People like us don't do things like that." Maybe whenever you tried something creative, you were mocked or dismissed. Over time, you internalize these messages as invisible ceilings. You stop even considering certain paths because they feel "not for people like me." On the flip side, you might have grown up with very high expectations. You're the smart one. You're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a success. At first, this feels like support, but it can also become a cage. If your worth is tied to achievement, then any deviation feels dangerous. You might stay in careers you hate or avoid trying new things because the risk of disappointing others feels unbearable. In this way, other people's dreams for you can turn into your own sense of wasted potential. Next, there's school and early education. Many school systems reward compliance, memorization, and test-taking over curiosity, creativity, and experimentation. If your gifts didn't line up with what school measures, maybe you're artistic, entrepreneurial, hands-on, or emotionally intelligent, you might have internalized the belief that you re-average or not that special. That belief can haunt you well into adulthood, even if your real potential lies outside what school ever valued. Then we have culture and society. Depending on your background, there may be strong messages about what you supposed to do based on your gender, social class, ethnicity, or age. You may feel pulled between your authentic desires and the roles your culture has prepared for you. Sometimes what looks like wasted potential from the outside is actually a person trapped between conflicting identities and obligations. And we cannot ignore economic and structural reality. It's much easier to reach your potential when you have money, time, safety, and access to resources. If you grew up with financial instability, carrying responsibilities, health issues, or in a dangerous environment, a lot of your mental energy went to survival rather than exploration. That doesn't erase your potential, but it absolutely shapes the paths that felt possible and the risks you were able to take. There is a dangerous myth in self-help culture that says, everyone has the same 24 hours in a day. Technically, that's true. Practically, it's nonsense. The quality of your 24 hours depends on your stress levels, your obligations, your support network, and your environment. Two people can have the same ambition and discipline, but drastically different opportunities. One looks like reached potential, the other looks like wasted potential, when in reality, their contexts were never the same. All of these external factors combine to form your sense of agency, your belief about how much control you actually have over your life. If repeated experiences taught you, nothing changes no matter what I do, you develop low self-efficacy and eventually, learned helplessness. You stop trying, not because you lack potential, but because you've been taught, through pain and disappointment, that effort doesn't matter. Here's the key point. Understanding external factors is not about making excuses. It's about making sense of your story. When you see how your environment shaped your beliefs, you can begin to question them. Is this limitation real, or is it something I learned and accepted? That question cracks open the door from "I'm wasting my potential" to "maybe my potential was never given a fair chance." But there's one more layer to this: how all of these experiences, internal and external, come together to form your identity. Because at the end of the day, what really keeps potential locked away is the story you tell yourself about who you are. In the next segment, we'll go into the psychology of identity and self-narrative, how you become the person who wastes potential, and more importantly, how you can stop being that person in your own mind. If potential is what you could do, identity is who you believe you are. And the gap between those two is where the idea of wasted potential lives. You might say things like, "I'm just not a disciplined person," or "I always quit," or "I'm the kind of person who never lives up to what they could be." Those aren't observations, they're identity statements, and they are incredibly powerful. Psychologists talk about possible selves, the versions of you that you imagine in the future. There are positive possible selves, successful, healthy, creative, admired. And there are negative possible selves, lonely, broke, regretful, invisible. Both types motivate behavior. The fear of becoming your negative possible self can either push you to change or paralyze you, depending on how confident you feel about your ability to influence your future. When you feel like you've already wasted years, maybe decades, it's easy to start telling a tragic story about yourself. "I always had potential, but I never used it." That sentence can become a kind of identity badge, bitter, self-aware, almost proud in its self-criticism. But as long as you keep repeating that story, you're reinforcing the very pattern you hate. You become the curator of your own regret. Underneath that story is usually shame. Guilt says, "I did something wrong." Shame says, "There is something wrong with me." When you believe your wasted potential is evidence that you are fundamentally flawed, lazy, weak, broken, you're dealing with shame, not just disappointment. And shame is one of the most paralyzing emotions we have. It doesn't motivate change, it motivates hiding. To cope with that shame, we develop different psychological defenses. Some people go into denial. "I never really wanted that anyway." They lower their desires to avoid feeling the pain of not living up to them. Others use rationalization. "If the system were fair, I'd be successful. It's all rigged." There may be truth in that, but if it becomes your only story, it can trap you in permanent victimhood. Some people swing to the opposite extreme, grand plans with no follow-through. Every few months, they announce a new project, a new life plan, a massive change. For a while, the idea of becoming great gives them a dopamine hit. But when it comes time to actually do the unglamorous work, they vanish. This pattern isn't just about procrastination. It's a way to keep the fantasy of potential alive without risking the pain of really committing. Then there's the classic midlife crisis scenario, which can happen at any age, not just midlife. You suddenly become very aware of time. You realize that certain doors are closing or have already closed. You start measuring your life not just by what you've done, but by what you haven't done. This confrontation with finiteness can either shatter you or wake you up. Here's where psychology offers a powerful reframe. Your identity is not a fixed object. It's a story you're continually editing. The past matters, but it does not have absolute authority over who you can become next. What keeps potential locked away is not just what you haven't done, it is the conclusion you draw from that, because I haven't done it yet, I'm the kind of person who never will. If you change the conclusion, you change the future. For example, instead of I always waste my chances, you can say, so far, I haven't used my chances the way I want to, but I'm learning why. Instead of I'm not disciplined, you can say, I haven't built discipline yet, because no one taught me how, but I can still learn. These small shifts sound trivial, but they move you from a fixed identity to a process identity, from I am this to I'm becoming something else. The most important psychological ingredient here is self-compassion. Not self-pity, not excuses, self-compassion. It means speaking to yourself the way you would speak to a close friend who's struggling. Without self-compassion, honest self-reflection turns into self-attack. With self-compassion, you can look at your wasted potential without collapsing into shame or denial. Now, understanding all of this is powerful, but it's not enough. Insight without action becomes just another chapter in the story of wasted potential. I even understand my psychology now, but I still didn't change. So in the final segment, we are going to talk about what you can actually do, practical, realistic steps to turn the psychology of wasted potential into the psychology of growth and momentum. If you've watched this far, there's a good chance you feel a personal connection to this topic. Maybe you see pieces of yourself in almost everything we've talked about. That's not a sign that you're doomed. It is a sign that you're becoming conscious of patterns that used to run your life in the background. Consciousness is uncomfortable, but it's the first step toward change. The first practical shift is this: shrink the scale of change. When you feel like you're wasting your potential, your instinct is to plan huge transformations. New career, perfect body, full creative output, total life overhaul. Those big visions feel exciting, but psychologically, they are overwhelming. Your brain sees them as threats, too much uncertainty, too many unknowns. So you freeze. Instead, think in terms of minimum viable change. What is the smallest meaningful step you can take that moves you closer to your potential? Not the perfect step. Not the ultimate step. Just the next honest step. If you want to write, the smallest step is not publish a book. It's write for 10 minutes today. If you want to get fit, it's not go to the gym 6 times a week. It's go for a 10-minute walk. Tiny actions, repeated, change identity. This connects to habit psychology. You don't become a different person by making one gigantic decision. You become a different person by repeating small actions until they become part of how you see yourself. I am someone who shows up, even if it's for 10 minutes. That identity is worth 1,000 unfinished grand plans. Second, design your environment to support your potential. Remember, your brain defaults to safety and convenience. If your environment is full of distractions, temptations, and friction, willpower alone won't save you. So make it easier to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong thing. Put your phone in another room while you work. Lay out your workout clothes the night before. Keep your guitar in the middle of your room instead of in a case under the bed. Third, deliberately practice emotional skills, not just practical ones. Every time you move toward your potential, uncomfortable emotions will show up. Fear, boredom, self-doubt, frustration. Most people interpret those feelings as signs to stop. Instead, you can learn to say, this discomfort is part of the process. If you can tolerate the emotional discomfort of doing the right thing, you become dangerous, in a good way. Fourth, build support and accountability. Potential rarely turns into reality in isolation. Tell someone you trust what you're trying to do, not in a performative way, but in a I want support staying honest way. Join a group, a class, a community. Human beings are wired to respond to social expectations. Use that psychology to your advantage. Fifth, learn to reframe your past wasted years. Instead of seeing them as proof that you're broken, see them as data. What patterns show up? When do you abandon your goals? What triggers your self-sabotage? What environments help you thrive? If you mine your past for lessons instead of punishments, your wasted potential becomes training material for the next chapter. Finally, zoom out and rethink what potential even means. Maybe your potential is not about impressive achievements or external validation. Maybe your real potential is about depth of character, quality of relationships, creativity, integrity, contribution. You may never become the exact ideal version you imagined at 18, and that's okay. The real question is, are you moving toward a life that feels honest, alive, and meaningful to you? At the end of the day, the psychology of wasted potential is the psychology of unlived life. It's the pain of knowing you could be more engaged, more courageous, more fully expressed than you are right now. That pain is not your enemy. It's a signal. It's your mind and body saying, there is more here. Please don't leave this life half-lived. You cannot change the years that have passed, but you can decide what story those years will tell about who you become next. You can remain the person who always had potential but never used it, or you can become the person who woke up one day, understood their patterns, and decided that the rest of their life would not be a repeat of the first part. The choice won't be made once. It will be made daily, in small, unglamorous decisions. But those are exactly the kind of decisions that quietly turn wasted potential into a life you actually proud to live. If this video helped you understand your own potential in a deeper way, take a second to hit like. It really helps more people find this kind of content. Share it with someone who might need to hear this today. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more long-form deep dives into psychology and self-growth. Let me know in the comments which part of this video hit you the hardest, and what small step you're going to take next.